Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me and see the screen well. It's 2:30 starting time. I guess some people will enter the room, but I will already start with a very short practical introduction. Many of you were here already last week, but some of you are joining here today for the first time. If you want to rewatch or watch the session from last week on planning, collecting, processing, and preserving 3D data, you can scan the QR code, sorry, to go to the YouTube video where you can find the full recording of this session. I have a few practical announcements because this is a webinar format. Your cameras and microphones are off. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box to send us any questions. We will try to answer them in the chats or live after presentation. If you have a more complex question, feel free to leave your contact information and we will reach out via email. This second and final session of this webinar series is also being recorded, and the slides and recording will again be shared with all of you to revisit. We have a very interesting program today, if I may say so myself. The first presentation today is on publishing 3D data by Valentina from Photo Consortium. She's also the project manager of the EUreka3D-XR project. She will be followed by Ariadna Matas from the Europeana Foundation, who will give a talk on 3D copyright in the public domain, a presentation I am looking forward to myself. And the final talk of today will be by me, and I will tell you all something about the reuse of 3D in practice in extended reality scenarios based on the results of this project. Voila. And then by 4, we will have ended this session and webinar series. But before we start with the presentations, I would like to give the word to Antonella Fresa, the project coordinator. The floor is yours, Antonella.
Thank you, Axel, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar. As Axel already explained, this is the second appointment. So for those who already attended the first one, my introduction is a repetition, and so I apologize in advance. But I think that if there are participants who didn't attend the first edition, maybe a few words to explain what is the EUreka3D initiative could be useful. First of all, EUreka3D and EUreka3D-XR are two projects. They are both funded by the European Commission under the Digital Europe program. The coordinator is a Photo Consortium, which is an international association that is also member of the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage. And both EUreka3D and EUreka3D-XR contribute to the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage. As you will hear also during the next presentations, this is the data space that is coordinated by European Foundation that is a member of both EUreka3D and EUreka3D-XR. EUreka3D lasted from January 23 to December 24, 2 years, during which we focused on supporting cultural heritage institutions with the digitization, promoting quality and in particular paradata. We have discussed about paradata in previous events, and developing a European-based digital infrastructure to store and access 3D data. And this has been presented in the previous webinar. EUreka3D-XR followed the successful completion of EUreka3D. It started in February 25. It is still ongoing until end of July 26. And in continuation with the EUreka3D, it has focused on transforming cultural contents, considering everything, 2D, 3D, videos, text, maps, stories, to transform all these contents into narratives and scenarios of extended reality. 12 partners from 8 European countries, including Switzerland, participate in EUreka3D-XR. Next, please. As I told you, EUreka3D has a very core interest in promoting quality. Quality in 3D digitization is becoming the real standard, the real important message that we want to promote towards cultural heritage institutions. Because if the digitization is done with the quality standard, following quality standards, then the results are sustainable. And this quality in 3D digitization of a cultural heritage have been promoted in particular through guidelines, a document that you can download from the website and using the QR code that is in this slide, through an online course, 3D digitization, prepare for success, that is accessible on the Europeana learning platform. Again, you have the QR code to the course, and through a program of webinars, among which the webinar of today. Take into account that everything about the quality is based on a study that is the so-called VG study on quality of 3D digitization of tangible cultural heritage, that is a major achievement, a major service that the European Commission committed to the Cyprus University of Technology, and that is our lighthouse on quality. Next, please. Around this concept of quality of digitization, as you see, the first left side phase is capture. We constructed the cloud services. That is safe storage, federated authentication and authorization infrastructure, the provision of permanent identification to the contents digitized, a 3D viewer, and the interoperability of Europeana with Europeana. All of this is what we call the EUreka3D Data Hub. Next, please. And what is EUreka3D-XR doing? Well, we want to transform EUreka3D-XR digital contents into user experiences and to demonstrate this. The work of EUreka3D is based on the delivery of 5 open source digital tools, 3 use cases and extended reality scenarios, new contents that are published on the data space for cultural heritage, and the program of capacity building. Next, please. The 5 new tools you will hear in the next presentations, they are AR Tool Builder, AR Tour Experience. Then we have an AI 3D Builder, a builder that uses AI technology, and the 3D XR Studios, where the AI built contents are delivered to users. And eventually the avatar builder, through which we will deliver on the 24th of May at the Englistra in Paphos a live demonstration of monks and the Saint Neophytos coming out from frescoes, medieval frescoes, telling their story. Next, please. These are the 3 scenarios. In Girona, the AI, the artificial intelligence methods have been applied to visualize Middle Ages walls of the city of Girona. In Bibrat, in the archaeological site of Bibrat, in the Morvan, in France, the CELS site is visited through the support of AR experiences created with the AR tool builder and AR experience tools. And in Paphos, as I told you, we are giving a new life to San Neophytos and to his monks in the Anglistra of Paphos. Next, please. I want to remind everybody that on the 26th of May in Cyprus, we will celebrate the final results of EUreka3D-XR. The registrations are open. You can also present posters about reuse of 3D contents for extended reality experiences in cultural environments. The link is available for your registration as well as the QR code. Next, please. And we have completed our presentation. I would like to give back the floor to Axel, who is introducing the next speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonella, for this very clear introduction once again. And I won't take up too much time and immediately give the floor to Valentina. So you can go ahead, start sharing your screen, and we'll look forward to your presentation on publishing 3D data.
Thank you very much. Can you please confirm you are seeing my screen correctly and you hear me?
Yes, everything works.
Okay, very good. Yes, my name is Valentina Bacchi and I work at the Photo Consortium. I will try to walk you through a variety of topics in this short presentation, so it won't be a very in-depth, let's say, discussion about publishing 3D content. I will very quickly give an introduction about us and about this environment where we are. Then we will talk a little bit what is the scopes of use and reuse for 3D collections. Then we will talk about opportunities for providing access to a variety of stakeholders to these 3D resources that cultural heritage institutions are producing. And finally, I will talk a little bit on how we can support the cultural heritage sector in this process and how we can really make this happen, to share the 3D collections for the benefit of all stakeholders. Yes, very quickly, Antonella already said something about Photo Consortium. We are a non-for-profit association. We started from an EC-funded European project that was marked with excellent in 2014. The name was Europeana Photography. It was really something to give to Europeana a wealth of new digital resources, particularly about photographic heritage. From that experience, the group of partners decided to found this sort of spin-off because the project was so nice, the group was so nice, and the scenario that was in front of us for the sharing and reuse of digital cultural collection was really exciting. And for this reason, we founded the Photo Consortium. Shortly after, we became an accredited aggregator and thematic hub about photography for Europeana. Now we are partnering the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage and the coordinator of the EUreka3D initiative that Antonella just mentioned. You would argue that photographic heritage is 2D. Well, it is not really true because photographic heritage also includes a lot of opportunities for publishing 3D data. And in general, this is a new frontier for all cultural heritage institutions since many years, because all of us, we started the digitization journey first by sharing collection in 2D. So we created really in Europe and in all over the world a mass of cultural data that is being published online. Now, we know that in recent times, there was this recommendation to member states in 2021 that we need to make a step forward to explore the possibilities and the opportunities of 3D. And for this reason, the recommendation sort of urged the member states and the cultural heritage institutions to digitize in 3D sites, monuments, collections, and to publish them in the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage. So we know, we also heard before that 3D digitization is something complex that poses various challenges. We need to plan a project considering its complexity, ensure that the models are in high quality, document all this process, and we have challenges on the safe storage and sharing for these collections. But let's say this is all solved. Now we have our 3D model. And what do we do with it once it is ready? Well, certainly a cultural institution can produce a 3D model for internal scopes, for internal preservation and documentation. But we think that there is much more that we can do for the use and reuse of 3D collections and for the benefit not only of the cultural institutions that produce the model, but also for the plethora of stakeholders who could benefit from this. So, yeah, of course, we all know that 3D digital objects are a bit more complex and with more opportunities than their 2D equivalents. So the point is really that the 3D has more potential than 2D, especially because it offers more immersive ways for exploring, studying, researching, and engaging visitors with our cultural collections. So we can use 3D objects for learning, education, and research, for preservation and monitoring scopes, and for reconstructing lost heritage. So to see how, for example, the walls in the medieval times in Girona looked like. These walls do not exist anymore. In addition to this, it is important to understand that 3D digitization is not only, capturing the geometric structure of an object. This is a part of the work, but if we are able to accompany this 3D model with the records of the stories of the cultures, the community, the tangible and intangible heritage that surrounds this object and that this object represents, then we do a very good job with an holistic approach, and we move to this concept of digital twin, a simple, between air quotes, geometric representation of an object to really a memory twin, something that really embeds all the story, tangible and intangible, of that object. Then, this was already a bit mentioned, we can reuse these 3D models for immersive experiences. Now we all talk about the metaverse. We know that we have these, physical lives and also the virtual lives. And the 3D models are already being used and will be used more and more in virtual reality or mixed extended reality experiences, virtual tours, remote training, in education, in tourism. So there is really creative reuse that we can do for these 3D models. And one thing that sometimes is not very highlighted is the fact that 3D models allow for 3D printing. And to create a 3D printed reconstruction of an object would have impact and useful applications, for example, for education, for children engagement, for touching an object that maybe is too fragile and cannot be touched, and not even by scientists, and also to support more inclusive experiences, for example, for impaired people. Finally, 3D models are also used for preservation, monitoring of monuments and sites, especially those which are difficult to reach. Let's think for example, to an underwater shipwreck. It is not that like every day researchers can go and see it. So to have a 3D model would really help to, study the object, to record all the details of the object, even those which are not really visible to the eye. And the final point that I would like to mention is the fact that there could be an employment for 3D models in the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural goods. And for example, if the police or the custom forces would have a database of 3D heritage, that could really help to detect identification of these objects in case they are retrieved in suspicious conditions. So I think by now I already praised enough the opportunities and the advantages of using and reusing 3D collections, but How to do this? We know that the 3D models can be useful to various stakeholders and categories of reusers, but the very starting point is that they find it, they discover these collections, and they are able to access it. Now, the very first and the most, let's say, self-explaining solution is to using these 3D collections in the institution's website, in the catalogs, and so on and so forth. But now we also want to maybe share this collection on a more, let's say, international scenario. And for this reason, Europeana, that now is evolving into this new concept of the common European data space for cultural heritage, is really a European-based discovery platform that offers opportunities to share and link data sets of 2D and 3D cultural heritage to a wider audience. When Europeana was born in the early 2000s, it was like, you know, the digital library of European cultural heritage. And now this point of access and point of discovery is evolving into something a bit more complex and a bit more advanced. I am showcasing here the landing page of the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage. You also see the link in the slide. You are very welcome to go have a look. And the next slide shows you really, you know, the core of this, what I call the digital library of cultural heritage in Europe. It is the landing page for the Europeana, let's say, website, where users can really search among, I think, 60 millions, over 60 millions of cultural heritage collections from all over Europe. I would say that this is an opportunity not to be missed, and that the participation in Europeana and the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage is valuable, because it allows institutions to really share the collection in what is currently the most advanced and the flagship initiative of the European Union for digital cultural heritage. There are other activities ongoing, other things cooking, but for the time being, Europeana is really the most advanced and the place to be for sharing cultural collections. Your collections and you will be in good company with over 4,000, maybe even more, content provider institutions from all over Europe. And also the Europeana Foundation is accompanied by the Europeana Network Association that reaches out to over 6,000 members that are following all these developments in the digital cultural heritage sector. It is also a way to promote the visibility of the institution and the collections, not only by sharing a data set, but also by publishing editorials, blogs, galleries that, engage users and foster reuse of these collections in stakeholder communities. And then, of course, we are a network of peers and colleagues that work together and discuss all together about the evolutions that we foresee for the cultural heritage sector. I will not go into big details here. I am talking about sharing data sets in Europeana. Good, but how this happens in practice, this is a bit of an exquisite technical point. The publication of this cultural heritage institutions data in Europeana happens by the use of exchanging the metadata and using the EDM Europeana data model. EDM is a metadata schema that exists since the dawn of Europeana, and it was developed a long time. Very recently, in the last year or so, the EDM has been extended and improved in order to accommodate more information that offers a better representation of 3D cultural collections, because we know from experience and practice that to deal with the 3D collection is more complex than dealing with 2D collections, and we need to provide more information to the user about this type of digital cultural heritage. And I am super prepared on this topic because the Photo Consortium had a real continuous role in the discussions about this extended EDM. So if you have any questions, I am happy to, to reply to this. Yes, I was mentioning that EDM wants to accommodate better the requirements of 3D collections. So this is super recent. As of April 2026, there is a number of expansions of the existing Europeana data model that regard specifically the 3D collections. So, for example, one thing that is becoming more and more important is the fact that the 3D model cannot just be a file, but needs to be viewed. And so for this reason, the 3D models must be visible by the use of an no-embed compliant viewer. This means that it's a viewer that shows in Europeana, and the EUreka3D Data Hub platform that Antonella mentioned also includes a viewer that works with Europeana. Then the file as such can be a GLB, OBJ, whatever. It is important that the user access it. So in the light of facilitating use of these 3D models, it is important that a direct download link is provided in the metadata. And another quite new development is the fact that when you offer your data set to a variety of stakeholders, which may have different requirements, it would be very helpful for them to know what the model is mainly meant for. Is it a model very deep, very complex for research and preservation? It is a simplified model for scopes of, education or gaming, etc. This is important information to let our stakeholders know, and now it is represented in a specific EDM field included in the EDM extensions. And final word I would say on Paradata. Paradata is the information that depicts the story of the digitization process, how that model was produced, by whom, with which level of quality, what is the accuracy of this model, and also what are the usage condition, the copyright, and also more specific information like polygon count or vertex count can be now included in the Europeana data model for stakeholders to get this information. Of course, if you have a Paradata report that is maybe more detailed or extended than this, let's say, primary information, it is also possible to provide the link to download your Paradata reports that accompany the object. And I am coming towards the end of this presentation. All of this that I explained may look a bit scary, perhaps, for those who are less familiar with this topic and with the Europeana and the data space for cultural heritage, but you are not. Cultural heritage institutions are not alone in this. There are institutions like Photo Consortium, accredited aggregator, that operate to really make this happen, to help cultural heritage institutions to take part in the common European data space for cultural heritage. And there are a lot of aggregators, many colleagues and friends of mine, but I can tell you what Photo Consortium is best positioned to do. Certainly, we have a lot of experience and expertise and knowledge about creating high quality collections. So 3D, but also 2D. I mentioned that we start from photographic heritage. So 2D is really one of our strengths, let's say, in addition to 3D. And we can provide you advice, support, capacity building resources, one-to-one assistance. Then Photo Consortium, as the coordinator of the EUreka3D initiative, can also help you with offering 3D storage and a viewer that is compliant with the Europeana by the use of the EUreka3D Data Hub, the platform that was mentioned earlier. we support the mapping of your metadata in your metadata schema to the Europeana data model, also accommodating all these changes that are happening as we speak. So we are in close contact with the Europeana colleagues and foundation. And so we are able to really support this process in making your metadata suitable for publication in Europeana. We also do all the support for these phases. So quality and compliance check, we help you to really create a data set that is that meets the requirement of the Europeana data model and the Europeana publishing framework. And then we are always very happy. We have an editorial team inside Photo Consortium that is in close contact with the editorial team at Europeana, and we are happy to, showcase your collections with editorials, blogs, galleries, and all types of publication. I would like to mention something that is makes me very proud and is also very on time. Perhaps you heard about the Twin IT campaign. That is an initiative of the European Commission and Europeana to really showcase the national heritage of the member states. So each member state was invited to provide one or more 3D model for peculiar objects of digital heritage, and many of them chose to be supported by us with the EUreka3D Data Hub to publish their models in Europeana for the Twin IT campaign. The Twin IT campaign is in its final, let's say, steps, will be celebrated on the 12th of May in Brussels with a very high level and super important ministerial celebration. And then we will also conclude, let's say, the stories of the Twin IT campaign with a creative hackathon in the end of May at the Hack It For You event in Limassol that happens in the context of the Digital Heritage Summit and the final event of EUreka3D that Antonella mentioned earlier. And if you're curious to see all these objects that Photo Consortium and EUreka3D helped aggregate, you find the link in the slide. And very final comments I would like to say. Europeana, I mentioned earlier, 60 million objects, even more. So how can your collections be visible? First thing I would like to say is that all the objects that you share in Europeana are collected, let's say, under the umbrella of your name, the cultural heritage institutions which aggregates it. Here you see that the UNESCO chair on digital cultural heritage, that are my colleagues in Cyprus, aggregate a lot of 2D, 3D models in Europeana, but also photography. You see this recurring theme of the photography. And each of these objects, if you click on it, you have a full page in Europeana where the model is shown. You see the model in the EUreka3D viewer with this very light blue background, accompanied with its metadata. And what we normally do at Photo Consortium with our partners is really to reuse these collections to promote them not only as objects published in Europeana, but by telling stories about the object, by producing galleries, and also by publishing not only in Europeana, but also in our other channels, case studies, educational resources, and whatever. Here you see, again, the model of this Sei Neophytos and Clystra, and we also published a blog post, very accurate, because based on historical research and written by professionals about the story of this saint. And we also see in the model that there are these beautiful frescoes in this church, let's say, and we also publish a gallery about the frescoes of St. Neophytos. So these are all ways that we use to really make your collections come to surface and be visible and discoverable by all type of users. And with this, my presentation is concluded. You see here, well, of course, my contact and the reference to Photo Consortium website. So you are very welcome to follow us and to get in touch for any question or information. So many thanks for your attention, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to reply.
Thank you so much, Valentina, for highlighting all these opportunities, for sharing your 3D collections and the support you provide. So if you have any questions right now for Valentina, please put them in the Q&A box. I think she will happily answer them in the chat box itself. And then I will invite Ariadna to start sharing her screen. So as I said earlier, the topic of Ariadna's presentation is 3D and copyright public domain. And from my own experience, I can say that a lot of professionals struggle with this topic. It's very complex. These complex legal frameworks can make professionals sometimes maybe a bit hesitant and risk adverse for sharing their collections. And even more so with 3D models, which are a bit more complex. So I'm very happy you are here, Ariadna. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Axel, and thank you for the invitation. Okay, my challenge will be to make you feel that this topic is approachable and and accessible to all of us. If there's anything that is not understandable, it's not you, it's me not explaining it right. And please feel free to drop a note in the Q&A. Because I'm more interested in discussing the actual questions that you have than what I assume might be the things you're interested in. So, well, looking forward to questions, comments, and to discussions around this. I thought I would take the opportunity through this presentation to talk about 3D models and the extent to which they might be subject to copyright protection or not, or might be in the public domain. There might be other questions around rights management, rights clearance that I won't touch upon. And if that's something that people are interested in, please let me know and we can also discuss them. As Valentina spoke about how Europeana operates, one of the things that needs to be complied with when submitting 3D models for them to be available via Europeana or the Data Space for Cultural Heritage is that they always need to be accompanied by information about the reuse possibilities or the lack of reuse possibilities. But in any case, every digital object, including 3D models, needs to be accompanied by what we call a rights statement, which includes Creative Commons licenses and Creative Commons public domain tools and rights statements, so that a user accessing the materials can easily judge whether they can use the materials in question in the activities that they're about, well, that they're interested in using the materials in. By asking all of the providers to assign a specific rights tag to the content that they share, in a way, we're kind of inviting everyone to do a rights assessment before the materials are shared online, so that users will know to what extent they can use them, and also so that you know if you can actually be sharing them online. So the question would then be, what rights statements should be applied to a 3D model depending on the circumstance, and how do I judge which is the best rights statement? Like what is the reasoning that I need to go through to get to a point where I choose a rights statement that is accurately assigned to the 3D model in question? Valentina was showing some screenshots as well, and so that's in case anyone's not familiar with how the information would then appear. This would be an example of an image on Europeana, and the rights statement, in this case a Creative Commons license CC BY, appears in a simplified form just below the image, and then also appears when the user unfolds the detailed metadata fields. If the user is not familiar with the little visual of Creative Commons, they can click on the button, and the button will take them to a page maintained by Creative Commons that explains what the conditions are. And when I say Europeana asks for a rights statement to be assigned to the digital object, we ask for that to be done by choosing from among 14 options. So we only rely on a couple of tools from Creative Commons and from rights statements. There might be other standards, even national standards, but they're not supported on Europeana. We use standards that work across borders, so that users that are accessing your content from a country that is not the one from which the materials are being made available from can still understand the implications when they want to reuse the materials. So we will ask you to use either a Creative Commons license, a Creative Commons public domain tool, or one of the 6 rights statements that you see on the screen. A very quick run through, and if you're interested in this topic, we have more materials on Europeana, and Valentina can also support you in understanding them better. But we recommend using Creative Commons licenses only if the materials are protected by copyright and you, the one applying the license, is the person or institution who owns the copyright. Public domain tools are there to convey the fact that the materials are no longer or have never been protected by copyright. And then right statements are, there's various options. The top 3, they indicate that the materials are protected by copyright, and then there's a couple of precisions. And the 2 that follow indicate that the materials are no longer or have never been protected by copyright, but there might be other things that the user needs to pay attention to. And the last one is a way to say we don't know if it's in copyright or out of copyright when making this material available online, which is something we advise not to do, because ideally you should know that you have a legal basis to publish something online. When I'm saying all this, I'm always thinking about the underlying object, not the digital surrogate, the digital version, but we'll dive into this in a moment. So in short, if the first question would be, is there copyright protection? If you are able to say there's no copyright, it's in the public domain, you'll already be able to narrow down from amongst the options of right statements that we facilitate in Creative Commons licenses and tools, and only 4 of the 14 options will be correct. If you respond to the question, is there copyright protection in the object, by saying yes, then some other options will be correct. And if you don't know, then you might be able to use the copyright not evaluated option. Generally, a workflow that I use when doing some copyright training exercise is to help people understand what are the various steps that can help you decide or understand whether there's copyright protection or not, is the following. First of all, you would have to ask the question, was there ever originality, which is the criteria to decide whether there's copyright or not? So was there ever copyright protection in the first place? If the answer is no, it's worth checking whether there's another type of protection, which we call neighboring rights, but we won't get into the detail today. If the answer is also no, then the material is out of copyright protection in the public domain, and it can be made available online without having to manage any rights clearance processes or asking anyone for permission. And when you make it available online, you would accompany it, in the case of Europeana, by one of these 4 options that acknowledge the public domain status of the material. Let's say you consider that there is originality or there are neighboring rights, so there is copyright in the material. The next question would be, has this copyright protection expired? Is this material now in the public domain? And if the answer is yes, the same answer as before, you can publish it without having to ask anyone for permission. And it would have to be published alongside the right statements or a Creative Commons public domain tool that acknowledges the public domain status. Now let's imagine you have been able to assess that there's copyright in the object, that the copyright protection has not yet expired, so copyright protection is still in place. The next big question will be to try to understand who is the person who owns the right, therefore who is the person that controls the exploitation, meaning the reproduction, the communication to the public, the distribution of the material in question. As you might know, when something enters the collections of a cultural heritage organization, it transfers the physical ownership, the property right to the physical ownership, but not if it's a donation, but not necessarily the intellectual property rights, which have to be transferred explicitly. So unless something is expressed in written form, you should assume the rights have not been transferred to you. So someone else is the one who is the rights holder, and therefore the one who can control the exploitation of the material in question if it's still protected by copyright. But let's imagine your institution obtained also the copyright when the materials entered your institution's collections. And in that case, because the materials are in copyright, you should use either an in-copyright right statement or one of the Creative Commons licenses. And in that case, you're allowed to use a Creative Commons license because you're the rights owner and you're allowed to enable reuse to the work. Now, let's go to the scenario that is most common. The materials are protected by copyright and you are not the rights owner. The question then would be to try to evaluate your national law to see if there's an exception or limitation to copyright that you can rely on to be able to still disseminate the materials online. And it might be that you can follow the, orphan works system, but that didn't work for most people, or the out of commerce works one. Or maybe there's another legal basis in your country, and in that case, you'll be able to publish the materials under the legal basis and accompanying them by a right statement that, for example, says, this is in copyright, so I cannot authorize you, user who will be viewing the material, to use it any further, but at least I can allow you to view it, and I'm informing you that this is in copyright. The only last resource would be to rely on a risk management approach if there's no other solution, which might only work in scenarios. And in that case, it would still be worth informing the user of the specific situation, perhaps through a right statement, but probably also through additional information. Well, so this would be the basic logic of the system in order to assess which set of right statement or Creative Commons license or tool is the most appropriate in the specific situation in which you're sharing the materials. Now, the big question is, lots of questions arise when it comes to the digital copy of the actual object, and even more when we're talking about reconstructions. But let's imagine objects that exist in real life. In this case, there's a photographic camera digitized in 3D. But what we see on the screen is an image that is very likely in the public domain because the object in itself is very likely in the public domain. Because I doubt that it attracted any copyright protection in the first place, and if so, it might have expired. Yet the right statement below the image says this is in copyright. And what happens is that many organizations claim that there is copyright, not necessarily on the underlying object, but in the digital replica of the object in question. So the object might be in the public domain, but then the 3D model all of a sudden is subject to copyright protection in the digital world. So let's look at whether that's possible or not. I understand that for many institutions, it's sometimes an approach driven by the huge investment that is made when doing 3D digitization, but it's also worth noting that sometimes it might not have any legal validity. So I think it's worth talking about different strategies and respecting the public domain status of the underlying object so that people can enjoy materials on which copyright has expired. So again, the question is, something might be in the public domain in the physical world, but then all of a sudden we see 3D objects that are subject to copyright claims. So in order to understand whether that's actually possible or not, legal or not, let's look at some quick basic notions of copyright. First, it's important to remember that copyright protection only arises if the material is original, if there is human originality. And it's also important to remember that this protection arises automatically. So regardless of whether, meaning there's no registration needed. So that puts us all in difficult situations because we cannot approach any official organization that can tell us whether something is protected or not. There's no registry, database, or authority that can tell us what is original and what is not, and therefore what is copyright protected and what is not, except for a judge if we go through a court case, which hopefully we don't. So that leaves us to having to make our own assessment when we've got materials in our collections, or a user that accesses digital materials through, for example, Europeana or otherwise. And our best guess should always be based on law and case law, and probably will get it somewhere close to what is correct, even though we will never know for sure. So let's look at this idea of originality. What is an original work, and therefore what is copyright protected? What the law and case law has been establishing is that something is original and therefore copyright protected if there have been creative choices that are made in the expression of an idea, meaning that the work is the author's own intellectual creation. So there's the personal imprint of an author in the actual work. So, for example, when Andy Warhol took that photograph and made something new out of it, he was definitely making lots of creative choices that transformed a previously existing work into something new. So there is originality in the result. The question would be, when we do 3D digitization, is 3D digitization, is the process driven by creative choices, leading to a model actually being copyright protected? And the general idea that we should always remember when trying to decide whether we claim copyright on a 3D model or not is that if creative choices are the type of choices that drive the making of the 3D model, there will be copyright in the 3D model as such, separate from what might exist in reality. But if the process is driven by technical choices, there will not be new copyright in principle. So there might be some exceptions, but that should be the general rule. And because we were a little bit worried about how 3D models would be labeled on Europeana, we actually commissioned a report on specifically this question. Are there new rights arising in 3D digitization or not? And the report was written by Dr. Andrea Wallace and Dr. Francesca Farmer from the lab answering precisely that question. And some of the things that they observed, for example, is that they looked at the 3D models that were available back in 2024 at Europeana, and they saw that while the underlying cultural heritage objects were almost always in the public domain, 93% of their digitizations were subject to copyright claims. So the photographic camera that I was showing earlier, a public domain object, but then an in copyright label is something that happens very often when 3D objects are shared online. And the report explained that even when making a 3D model requires significant time, expertise, and investment, 3D models do not receive copyright protection if they are non-original, if there isn't that human originality or these creative choices being made in the process of making the 3D model. And the authors of the report recognize that this exposes certain irony for 3D heritage projects, because the more someone invests in making a good model, a model that is accurate, the less likely it is that there will be copyright protection. The less likely it is that we're ticking the box of originality, authors on intellectual creation, and creative choices. And by contrast, the more original, the more creative the model is, the less useful it is likely to become for study and other purposes that require reliable data and accuracy. So going back to that idea that if we have an underlying model that is in the public domain, and we've created a 3D model out of it, if it's a 3D model that is mostly driven by technical choices, there won't be new copyright. If the creative choices are what drive the making of the model, there will be new copyright. And my understanding is that in most cases, the making of 3D models is driven by technical choices. If it's a good model that tries to represent reality the best way possible, it's going to be mostly technical choices. And even if they require an impressive level of expertise or a huge investment, an economic one, that's not a criteria for copyright to arise. So we should not assume there will be new protection. Sometimes when we say there's no copyright, it might sound insulting, but in reality, copyright is a system designed to support creativity. And sometimes we try to trigger it in areas that are very valuable, have an immense cultural value, but are not necessarily about creating new artworks or leaving an original imprint. So let's look at two quick examples. This is an example of an exact replica. The report that I mentioned by Andrea Wallace looks at this example and explains the underlying cultural heritage object is not subject to any copyright protection. It is in the public domain. And the 3D model accurately depicts the real object, and it's not, it doesn't appear to be a new original work of art in the sense that it would be the author's own intellectual creation. So in that case, the correct thing to do would be that if the underlying object is in the public domain and there's no new copyright arising in the digitization, we inform the user of the public domain status of the object. So in the context of Europeana, we would be able to choose between the public domain mark, the CC0 public domain dedication, or one of the two right statements about the public domain. This is another example of a reconstruction. So in this case, the report understood that the model had been made using pictorial, photographic, and technical documentation, including a combination of an inventory of wooden structures with 3D scans of the market square in question. And if this reconstruction was not uniquely based on scientific information, but was the result of an author's own intellectual creation, then we could say that this reconstruction is subject to copyright protection, whereas the underlying object or like the underlying space isn't. And so the institution making that reproduction and making it a reconstruction and making it available online could choose from amongst the Creative Commons licenses or one of the two in copyright right statements. And just to wrap up, a quick reminder that even when copyright arises, if you are the rights owner, you are always able to waive it or to license the materials openly so that users can enjoy and exploit the material further. And this is something that is very much in line with the European Public Domain Charter, which establishes that if something is in the public domain in analog form, ideally, we always encourage organizations to maintain the public domain status when sharing it digitally. So when you choose a right statement, it should reflect that public domain status of the underlying work. Well, that's everything I wanted to say. I hope it made some sense, and let me know if you have any questions.
Hi, thank you. I think this was really interesting. The flowcharts, very useful, I think. I will use this for my work as well. We have no questions so far in the chat box, in the Q&A box. I want to invite everyone, if you have a question, don't hesitate to write it down. Drew, one of the colleagues from EUreka3D-XR, has a really interesting comment. He says that, so one of the ways of applying copyright would be to show the digitization process through the paradata, as this would show the level of creativity invested in the creation of the 3D assets.
Yes, that would be amazing. And it's actually one of the recommendations that Andrea makes in the report. That would be very helpful to assess also whether the right statement applied is correct and in line with the copyright status. So if you believe there has been a creative input in the process of making the 3D model, it's very important and the paradata is a great place to add this also in line with what Valentina was saying.
Yeah, to document.
And it's yes, indeed. And it's also great for users to understand that we're not seeing an exact replica of reality.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, interesting. There is a question from Ale Torkel. I hope I pronounce this correctly. Probably not. I'm so sorry. They say, I make touchscreen applications for museums and exhibitions. Can I reuse 3D models labeled non-commercial as basis of my demos to promote my services? I don't sell the models.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a very good question. And the non-commercial notion is always, it's a bit uncomfortable because there isn't a specific definition. Creative Commons, for example, they have their non-commercial licenses that some people might apply to the 3D models that you're interested in using. And Creative Commons explains that the definition might also depend on the jurisdiction you're in and how the courts have interpreted the concept. But generally speaking, I would say that if you're conducting a commercial activity in a broad sense, it's likely that you are not able to, like that you shouldn't be using non-commercial material. Even if you're not directly selling them, there might be other types of commercial implications. But to be very sure, then I would recommend that you check some of the Creative Commons guidelines they have on the non-commercial definition. Yeah, before you stop using these materials at all. But that's also one of the reasons, because the non-commercial thing is so like you never really know unless you're really conducting a very clearly a business. Like there might be a school where one day they're trying to do an activity to collect money for going on a trip. Like it's always, even if it's a public school, you never really know. So that's one of the reasons why I would discourage those who apply a right statement or a CC license to a model to think very carefully if they apply a non-commercial one, because it might play against some very good activities that could happen.
Yeah. And thank you. I have another question coming from Casilda. The digital 3D object might be a derivative work, but how come the mesh and textures created specifically for a proper display in real time are not protected? Does this mean that Assassin's Creed reconstructions of historical landmarks are public domain?
Okay. I'm trying to think about the answer. Yeah. If I mean, so what I was trying to say is that when we're talking about an exact replica of reality, it's difficult to imagine that whomever made the 3D model was leaving their personal touch or like their personal imprint. They were trying to disappear from the picture to create something that is a reflection of reality. I am not familiar with like what Assassins, like how much room for creative choices there is when these mesh and textures are made. If there have been creative choices made, then I would say there might be copyright, but it needs to be seen in the result. If the result is an exact replica of what exists in reality, it means there has been perhaps one could say creative input in how to make something an exact replica, but the creativity is not reflected in creating something new, let's say. So as long as we're creating an exact replica, I would argue against the existence of copyright.
Okay, thank you. Antonella, you have a question.
I have a question that maybe can be naive or I don't know. Now we have the generative artificial intelligence that can be trained with public domain information. So is the result of the application of AI techniques to public domain information producing something that remains public domain, or is there an artificial creative copyright that is generated through the application of AI?
Thanks, Antonella. Yeah, no, I don't think it's a naive question. No, in principle, AI alone, the outputs of AI generation alone are not by such protected by copyright. Maybe if the outputs were, for example, quoting specifically the text of a song, well, of a song that exists and that has been created by a human that is protected by copyright, well, there would be copyright protected elements in the answer. But if AI creates an artwork, the artwork is not protected by copyright. One of the this notion of originality in copyright requires that there is human originality. So it has to be the human leaving a personal imprint into the work. Now
So
some
the creation, if I understand well, the generation of new contents through AI has the same copyright generation that no copyright generation that is connected with the digitization. So also in the digitization, if I digitize something that is under copyright, I produce something that is in digital format, but has the same rights of the original material. Similarly, through AI, if I use something to train the AI that is under copyright, then the copyright is transferred to the generated content, while if it is a public domain, nothing is transferred to the generated content.
It's not necessarily that it's transferred as such, because the training happens on so many like an immense amount of materials. If a poem that exists in reality was reflected in the output, yes, but that's rarely the case. So something is generated out of understanding and processing lots of information. So whatever is generated as a result doesn't carry the copyright status of the information that has been processed. And no new rights arise either. So that raises the question, is it okay that AI is trained on so many materials that might be copyright protected, on which authors have not authorized it? And what the law in the EU currently says is that AI can, well, text and data mining techniques, mass analysis techniques can happen on copyright protected materials unless the rights holder has explicitly said, I don't want AI to train their models on my copyright protected materials. But if there is no explicit opposition, it can be processed through text and data mining techniques. But the copyright that exists in the many works that have been used to process the information isn't necessarily transferred to the output. And then some people say, maybe I wrote a script and then I only asked AI to correct a couple of things. Is the result out of copyright protection? Maybe in that case, you could argue there has been human originality because most of the work had been done by a human and there's just AI assistance. In that case, there could be protection. I'm mixing various things. I don't know if it's clear.
If I may, I would ask a clarification. So the creativity that is in the AI algorithm and the creativity that is in the 3D digitization, the creativity in the use of techniques that are complex, this does not generate copyright, even if there is a human creativity in the use of a complex technology.
Correct. Yeah, I would. Yeah. Overall, yeah, correct.
Creativity is not the creativity that is connected with the use of a technology. Creativity should come from an artistic thinking.
Yeah, more in that sense. Yeah, it's like it's not about being smart or very capable on using a technology. Yeah.
I'm interrupting at this point. I think this is a very interesting and relevant discussion, but I see we have a little over 20 minutes. So if it's okay with you, I will read two last comments in the chat box by Drew. He's commenting on this in the previous discussion. So he says that in the case of Assassin's Creed, while they are based on technical evidence, the mesh is imagined because it does not exist. And the textures are also imagined in the sense that they need to be reworked to fit in the mood of the game. So I guess he's saying this from some creative input there. And then I see there's one question coming in. If it's okay, I will go over to my presentation, and then if we have some time left or people want to stay in the meeting, we can talk about the last questions. Okay?
And I can also type an answer in the meantime.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Ariadna. Then sharing my screen over here. Moving you over here and oop. Okay. I know you're not seeing my full screen, but I hope everything is clear anyway. So I'm a little bit tight on time. I'll try to keep it short. I was a bit optimistic with my slides. I have 50 of them. So let's go. I'll talk about how we can reuse 3D data in extended reality experiences. So my presentation will be based on the EUreka3D-XR project, where we developed 5 tools and XR scenarios. But first, I want to quickly touch upon why extended reality is relevant for cultural heritage professionals before moving on to the tools and scenarios. So when we talk about extended reality, most of the time we're using this as an umbrella term, including augmented reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality, which you can imagine as a kind of spectrum going from the real world to fully virtual environments with in between different levels of digital overlay. So in my presentation, I will talk about augmented, mixed, and virtual reality. And depending on the extended reality scenario, you will need different types of hardware to present your extended reality scenario to your end users. So why would you invest as an as a cultural heritage professional in extended reality? Valentina also talked about this already, but I wanted to touch upon some things. So it's a really interesting tool, 3D and extended reality, to preserve fragile heritage. Connected to this is that it's a way to improve accessibility for sites that are hard to access, for example. Extended reality offers a lot of opportunities to create multisensory experiences, which can improve accessibility for people with hearing or visual impairments. It's a medium that's great at recontextualizing heritage objects in their original environments, which help us to tell more complete stories of an object. And also connected to this, I think, is the reconstruction of lost elements in heritage sites, for example. And especially augmented reality can be a great tool for this. And then finally, extended reality is often used in research and education, especially in education, where we see it used for safety training, for example, or to complete complex procedures. But it can be truly a really immersive and interactive medium to engage young people, children, and to transfer knowledge and empathy with the heritage and history to them. So overall, it helps us to move from static data to really meaningful and interactive experiences. And not only that, extended reality is also strongly supported at European policy level. So this recommendation from 2021 was mentioned already, where the European Commission encourages member states to invest in 3D, to digitize, to reuse, to share it, and especially through extended reality and AI. So I think at this point, we can say that extended reality has moved from being an experimental tool to also becoming a strategic priority. And also important, it can be an interesting way to generate monetary value for your organization. But of course, there are challenges when working with extended reality, which we try to solve with this project. People might lack access to high quality 3D data. They don't know if they can use them in an extended reality scenario. They lack skills. There's an uncertainty about standards and so on. So let's zoom in on the Eureka tools that we developed to hopefully give an answer to some of these challenges and to inspire you with showcase scenarios we developed with them. So the project developed a set of 5 tools supporting different types of extended reality and 3D generation. And I will present each tool individually and then showcase how we use them for these 3 pilot scenarios. Okay, starting with the AI 3D Builder. More than a tool, the AI 3D Builder is actually a workflow with guidelines to transform 2D objects into a 3D object that's reusable in extended reality scenarios. going through the workflow really quickly. So you start with Photopea, where you start to prepare your 2D objects, your images. So you clear the background of the object. You only want the object of interest to remain in the image before going on to the AI tool, which is Trellis. In Trellis, you have 3 small steps, and then AI does the work for you. So first you will import 1 or more images. Then you can choose your settings, and Trellis will show you the results of the 3D generation. So this is generative AI, sorry. So depending on the images you put in, the quality of them, the quantity of them, you might need to generate the model a few times. So and step 2 might take a while to get to a model you're satisfied with. In a third step, so from Trellis, you can export the 3D model. And then in these guidelines, we point you to Blender, where we give some guidelines to users who wants to use this workflow to optimize the 3D model. So again, Trellis is an AI tool. In some cases, the 3D model might not be complete yet. Some vertices might be missing. So we set up some guidelines to fix these minor issues before going to the last to final step, which is the texture generation. So in Photopea, you can optimize the texture images prepared by Trellis. And then as a final step, you can go to Blender and apply it to the 3D model. So 5 steps, which might take some time and getting used to, but we try to write step-by-step guidelines for people who want to try this workflow. And we also want to showcase how we did this ourselves. So for the pilot scenario in Girona, we use this workflow using historical sources and images from the city archive in Girona to combine them in also maps, images, videos, all different types of media. And this was the result, the generated 3D model of the historical city walls of the city. And then these 3D models were used in the next tool, the 3D-XR Studio. The 3D-XR Studio is a web application to create and manage extended reality scenarios. There's a mobile version, a web version of this tool, sorry, where as a curator, you can create an environment, put in your 3D models, and then create an augmented reality path. This is some screenshots. So you define an area, a real life area, somewhere in this world. You can position 3D models on the map and then link them together to create a guided tour. So this is a web version, but as a curator, you can also use a mobile version to fine-tune your augmented reality tour, if that's what you want to do. And then from a visitor's side, this would be what they see. So a visitor, in this case in Girona, they can go to a physical totem, physical point in the physical world. They can scan a QR code, download the app, and follow the suggested path and see the 3D model of the historical walls overlaid on reality. And I think I have a short video in this next slide, but I don't think you see it.
We can see the video from the
You can see the
slides,
video?
yes.
Okay, sorry, I was...
Yes, yes, it is a bit, yeah, not very fluid, but it works.
Okay, perfect. So at first you saw the video of the, I know, this is the view of someone walking on the city square in Girona, projecting the generated historical walls on the place where they once used to be. So the green line is the path that the curator defines for the end user to follow. So it's a really simple tool to create these kind of lightweight guided paths. You can add like this light bulb, you can add some checkpoints and info points and other media and descriptions for your end users. Voila. So this was the first demonstration scenario. Are my slides still moving now for you? I think so. Okay, sorry. Then I will go on to the third and fourth tool, the AR Tour Builder and Tour Experience. And these are two tools. They come as a set to create location-based tours, augmented reality tours outside. So the workflow looks like this. So as a curator, again, you can start creating an augmented reality tour. You add points of interest for your tour, your walk on your site, for example. And at each point of interest, you can attach 3D models, images, video materials, quizzes, anything that can be very interactive for your end users. And then with the AR Tour experience, you can offer this augmented reality experience on site to your visitors. I have some screenshots. So this is the web application you would use as a professional to create your augmented reality experience. So you start by creating a new project. It fully supports multilinguality. You can brand it to your own guidelines. Here you see that you can put in coordinates to attach the 3D models or extra information. There's an asset library where you can keep and manage all your 3D models and reuse them in other augmented reality tours. And this is connected to the EUreka3D data hub, where you can fetch the 3D models. There's also functionality to kind of position the 3D models better in the augmented overlay. And this would be the view for the visitors in the AR Tour experience. So the fourth tool in our toolbox. You see here the visitors of the site in Bibrac, the archaeological site, showing a cave that's an excavation site that today is no longer visible. It's been filled up again. But we're using this tool. It's really interesting to reveal what's lost, what's been backed up again, what's now archaeological finds that are now in the museum. So these are some screenshots of what the site visitor would see in the AR Tour experience. So they can access multiple tours. They have their own agency to start a tour. The AR Tour experience supports free roaming on your site, so they can choose which points of interest they go to. You can also provide guided tours, so with fixed paths. And here you can see the view of all related media that you can attach to a point of interest. And these are some images to give the idea of how extended reality and especially augmented reality is a really interesting tool for archaeological sites. Before I go on to the final tool, the fifth tool, Avatar Builder, I want to take a minute to place the AR Tour Builder and 3D XR Studio next to each other because I said augmented reality quite a lot of times in the last few minutes. And I wanted, and indeed, these tools do similar things. They serve similar purposes, but they each have their own specific features. So to begin, AR Tour Builder, AR Tour Experience, they're two connected tools. One is for building and one is for experiencing an augmented reality tour. There is pre-downloadable content for low connectivity environments, but you need internet connection as a visitor to download this first. And you should be able to navigate using a GPS. So for NB Practice was the best case to do this. And you use the AR Tour Builder and Experience for outdoor location-based tours. The 3D-XR Studio is one tool with two versions, one in the web, one mobile. This one is also accessible. The tours are accessible after initial downloads. And these augmented reality walks can be offered both inside and outside. And navigation here is not based on GPS, but it's used by the input from your camera. So you have these physical points at the beginning of a walk where you scan a code and then the tour starts. So the choice really depends on your scenario, not just on the technology you're using to create an extended reality scenario. Then, final tool, the Avatar Builder. The Avatar Builder is like AI 3D Builder, a workflow and a set of guidelines to help you create animated characters that can be used to tell stories and guide visitors in a web experience, in an immersive virtual or mixed reality environment. We use three tools for this. The first one is Make Human, to create your avatar. It uses a graphical interface with sliders where you can control different features like gender, age, height, weight, and create a quite realistic human-like avatar. You can dress him up, give him a good haircut, and then once you're happy with your result, you can export your avatar, and it's ready for the next step, which would be avatar animation. You can, in Mixamo, they rig the avatar which allows you to include animations in the character, like jumping, walking, running, and so on. You can save them in the avatar, apply them to the avatar. Again, export this. I'm sorry, I'm rushing a bit. I'm looking at the time. We suggest Blender in these guidelines to improve the character a little bit, adjust colors. Oftentimes you have this metallic shine, so we try to improve this before going to the final character. And in Blender, you can also use Blender to do basic facial animations and add audio narration to the character. And the final step would be to upload this finalized character to the EUreka3D data hub. And then you can, I think my video is starting. And then you can access the MiraLab viewer. I'm keeping the rest of the video for later because I have a better one. So after this step, you are ready for mobile display in the viewer created by MiraLab. If you want to go a step further to include your avatar in a VR or mixed reality experience, in the project, we also created a template that includes all needed technical setups to minimize technical complexity for professionals who want to start experimenting with VR, MR, and digital characters. And as a final slide, I want to show you this video. Some of you saw it last week, but I just want to... Is it playing?
Yet, at least not to me.
Yet.
I don't know why it's not working. Oh, that's too bad. I can't seem to.
Wait, for
Yes.
now it is coming,
Yeah.
yes.
Step into the sacred silence of the enclystra of Saint Neophytos. As you enter this immersive experience, Saint Neophytos himself appears to share his story. Guided by an interactive interface, you will be invited to choose different moments from his life and uncover the chapters of his spiritual journey.
Axel, maybe you can share the link in the Q&A box so
Yes.
people can watch it after the event.
Okay, I will. I'm so sorry for going over time. I hope you had a good overview of what these 5 tools can do and what they can do for you. You got inspired by the showcase scenarios. I see a question from Olha, where can I find the Blender template and documentation? They will be published very shortly. I'm looking at my colleagues as well. Maybe they can give some more details, but they're coming, right?
Yes, actually, these tools, which have been created as prototypes and released in beta version in October, and now are about to be released as a final, let's say, product. They are due, well, basically in the beginning of May. So in the beginning of May, there will be all the resources available in the project website, and also you will have the possibility to really access the tools, to register, to start experimenting with them, creating your own little tours of your site or cultural heritage location. So it is coming. The final version is due actually by today, the 30th of April. So in the next week or so, it will also be published for dissemination in the project channel. And maybe Axel, just to there is some discussion ongoing, as you can see in the Q&A, but there is an interesting question about the differentiation of some of the tools. So, for example, Antonio asks which tool, the AR Tour Experience or the 3D-XR Studio, which of these would offer a more accurate and stable location in real space? Maybe you can quickly sort of summarize what are the main features of the one and the other, so that a user can really understand which tool is best for their own needs.
Yes, so without knowing all
quickly, of
intricacies.
course,
So
the time is running
to summarize, AR Tour Experiences uses GPS location for real-time navigation on site. The 3D-XR Studio uses camera input, so not the real life location of a visitor on site. So I would say, but again, without knowing all the intricate details, I would say the AR Tour Experience with the GPS-based location would offer the best, most accurate positioning of the user in space and on the tour. I hope this helps. Going to the questions as well. Maybe we could say we look at the questions, we try to take them up in our documentation. We will provide very shortly on all these tools, so keep an eye on our project webpage. And then maybe to conclude, I want to give the final word to Antonella to conclude this webinar series. I hope you found this interesting, so thank you.
Thank you, Axel. and certainly Valentina, Ariadna, and you, Axel, again for your presentations. I hope that everybody enjoyed what we have done. We pushed ourselves to deliver these 2 other webinars to complete our capacity building activity. However, there is more than will happen on the 25th 26th of May in Cyprus. The final celebration of EUreka3D-XR will take place in the frame of the Digital Summit under the aegis of the presidency of Cyprus of the European Union. So for those who will join us in Cyprus, please see you soon there. That will be an event only in presence, so we are pushing the personal exchanges among people. But since not everybody will manage to come to Cyprus end of May, which is a pity, I think you are missing something. We will have another event in Brussels that I hope you will be able to join either in presence or online at the end of June. It will be promoted and advertised with the full program soon. It is really the final public event of EUreka3D-XR. However, please note that EUreka3D, EUreka3D-XR do not finish with the end of the EU co-funding project. We continue. EUreka3D is a successful initiative. We feel that we must continue, and we are in the process of establishing a longer life for the EUreka3D Competence Center. So please remain in contact. We will soon send a request to everybody who joined the events, the newsletter, the other communities that we have established through EUreka3D and EUreka3D-XR to create a new, longer lasting community, the EUreka3D Competence Center. Thank you very much and see you soon, in person or online. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.